What's going on, guys? My name is Derek. Welcome back to the channel Euro Superbike Life, or ESBKLife for short. Behind me is my 2015 MV Agusta F3 800 track bike. This is also our F3XX replica that we've been working on. And a little bit later in this video, I'll provide some updates where we stand with the bike, tuning, brakes, when it's going to be on track, all that good stuff. But in today's episode, we are changing this bike from standard shift pattern to race shift pattern, or reverse shift pattern, also known as GP shift, right after this. Welcome back, guys. So let's talk a little bit about standard shift versus reverse shift. So standard shift pattern is 1 down, 5 up, hence my t-shirt. 1 down, 5 up. So first gear is down, so you'd step down on the gear selector, and then the remaining 5 gears are up. So you get your toe under the gear selector and you lift up. So second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And if you want to go down gears, you step down. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Really simple, right? So what are we doing here? We are installing a shift lever that reverses that so that it will be 1 up, 5 down. So when I lift up, I will go to first gear, and then all other gears, all the remaining 5 gears will be down. So second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. The exact opposite of standard shift. Why would you want to do that? Well, on a track bike, the standard shift pattern isn't ideal. So imagine you're leaned over left-hand corner. It's really difficult to get your foot under this lever to shift up while you're leaning. You actually have to wait till the bike is nearly vertical, then shift up, and then start to accelerate hard. The benefit of reverse shift is that while you're still leaned over, it's really easy to grab a gear, bang, shift down. While you're still leaned over, you can start to accelerate out of that corner. So it's ideal for the track, not so much ideal for the street. We are going to be installing a reverse shifter on this bike so that we have reverse shift. So let's talk about that a little bit, because there are a number of ways that you can do that. Some bikes just come set up for it. You can simply swap the position of the rod or so forth, and bang, you have reverse shift. Things get a little bit more complicated when you have a auto blipper quick shifter in here. So let's bring you in here a little bit closer and let's talk about the components. So here we have our gear selector, or our shift lever. It's attached to a shift rod. On this bike, I have a quick shifter auto blipper component. These aren't standard on all bikes, but for a lot of sport bikes in the modern era, they're becoming standard equipment. So your bike may or may not have that. And then we have our shift linkage up here, this silver rod right here, which is connected directly to the transmission here. Because the shift lever there's a pivot point here, and the rod is connected to the gear selector on the end over here. When I step down, the rod goes up, the shift lever linkage goes up. And when I lift up on the shift lever, everything pulls down. So this rod and everything comes down. That's important to note on this bike. What's different on some bikes is that this gear selector is sometimes connected to the rear set, which is the case on my BMW S1000RR. You can see that the gear selector is connected directly to the rear sets on that bike. On our MV here, that is not the case. The gear selector is actually connected to the frame of the bike. And that's important to note, because whether this gear selector is connected to your rear sets or not changes how you can upgrade from standard shift to reverse shift. So in order to have reverse shift on this bike, I could do a couple of things really easy. I could take the shift linkage, rotate it 180 degrees, and then bam, I would have reverse shift. That way, when I stepped down on this shift lever, I would be going up in gear, and when I lifted up on this shift lever, I would be going down in gear, which is exactly what I want to have happen. However, on this bike, because I have this quick shifter auto blipper mechanism, if I do that, it's going to be sending the wrong signal to the bike. The bike is going to say, hey, he's trying to upshift, but the signal that I got says downshift. So therefore, I'm going to disable everything, and the quick shifting auto blipping on this bike will cease to work. Another option would be if I had some adjustment points or some mounting points for the rod on the behind the pivot point of this gear selector. So if I would take this rod, this eyelet here, and mount it on this side of the pivot point, now when I shift it down, there would be a one-to-one. It would pull the rod down, and when I lift it up, it would push the rod up. That would also give me GP shift, and I wouldn't lose what I'm doing here, so the bike would still know exactly where it is and what it's supposed to be doing, so I wouldn't change anything. However, I don't on this bike. I don't have another mounting point over here to do that. However, that's exactly what we're going to be doing by installing our CNC Racing reverse shift lever here. I'll give you the part number. It is PE330B. One other word of note for the CNC Racing reverse shift lever. CNC says that this is only compatible with 2 of their particular rear sets. And that's not exactly true. And I'll explain why here. Again, with the MVs, with most MVs, particularly this F3, the gear selector is not mounted to the rear set. It is mounted to the frame of the bike. Therefore, it doesn't make any difference as long as your gear selector that you're choosing mounts to the stock location of the gear selector on the bike. You could use almost any gear selector with your rear sets. And that's what we're going to do here. We're not going to be changing out our gearless rear sets. We're just going to be changing this shift lever. And basically, it's going to remove this rod from in front of the pivot point to behind it. That way, everything still remains the same up here. And our package of hardware. Then we have a number of spacers and so forth. There are no instructions on this. So we're going to have to go online and figure things out. There's a small illustration on here how it goes. So this goes like that, some kind of way. So this sort of mounts like this in this orientation. And we have a couple of mounting holes here. Hopefully it'll focus, but we got a couple of mounting holes here for our shift rod, which is behind the pivot point. So we should be good to go. All right, guys, so I went to CNC Racing's website and I found this exploded parts view of our reverse shift lever. They promote this as the install instructions for this reverse shift lever. And as you can see, it's not exactly install instructions. It's more just an exploded parts view, which is okay because we can use that. Having said that, let's take a look at some of the things you're going to need to install this shift lever. In addition to the shift lever components themselves, you're going to need an 8mm wrench, 2 10mm wrenches, a 4, 5, and 8mm Allen socket. You're going to need a 3/4 inch ratchet, some blue medium thread locker, and some wheel bearing grease. So what we want to do first is we want to remove our existing shift lever along with the rod and the upper linkage. So we have a 5mm here, a 4 here, a 5 here, and then there's a bracket that's specific to this gearless rear sets that we want to take off because our CNC Racing reverse shift lever comes with its own bracket. So you got a couple of 8mm bolts back here. One of these bolts doubles as an exhaust hanger on the backside. So I have a couple of 10mm bolts on the backside. You may have something else. So again, your mileage may vary, but let's start with removing these components here, and then we'll get our 8mm and we'll remove that and we'll install our bracket. This brushless impact wrench may come in handy for you as well. All right, that removes our shift rod. We'll grab our 8mm and we're going to remove this bracket because we're going to need to adjust this bracket down a little bit so that we can maintain the 90-degree angle that it currently has. All right. And we just slide that right off. Don't lose that bolt. Set that aside. Now we're going to grab our 8mm and we're going to remove the shift lever itself. set that aside. Now we can see our two large 8mm Allen bolts. As I mentioned, on the back side of this one, I have a 10mm nut. And by the way, this particular bolt is a specialty bolt. I think you can only get it from MV Agusta. It's double threaded. So as I mentioned, the backside serves as a mounting point for this exhaust hanger that you probably can't see back here. So it threads into the frame, and then there's a threaded end that goes through it, and that's where this nylon lock nut comes in. Anyway, now we can take our large 8mm. Take that one out. And we'll take that off. We'll allow our side stand to hang. And here is our bracket that is specific. It actually came with the Gillis rear sets here. But here's that bolt that I told you about. Hopefully that's in focus. But you can see it's threaded here, and then there's a shorter end that goes through, and then it threads there. And this is the part here where the exhaust hanger goes on. So this one is actually a little worse for wear, but I should probably order a new one from MV. Okay, so now we are going to take our bracket from our CNC racing set. If you plan on removing your side stand, use these two bushings in the place. So this would go on like this, and the bushings would go behind it in place of where the bracket for your side stand. I'm keeping my side stand. I find it useful for my track bike. I don't do any racing. A lot of racing organizations make you remove the side stand, but I don't do any racing. I just do track days, so I prefer to do this. All right, so I'm gonna grab my blue thread locker and one of the 8mm bolts, and I'm going to add a little bit of blue thread locker to it. Grab the bracket, put that in like so. Okay. I'm going to grab my other bolt. Some blue thread locker again. I'm just going to make them snug, but feel free to look up the torque specs if you like. There we go. I'm going to take my 10mm, I'm going to put it back on the back side here for my exhaust hanger, so I don't forget that. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to open my bag of goodies here, and there's going to be a large silver washer that we want. So let's dig in here. There we go. We grab our large silver washer there. And we have our pin, and this slides into a bushing on our shift lever here. So we have our screw/pin. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but there is a rubber O-ring. Make sure the rubber O-ring is on yours at the top right here. And then we're just going to grab a little bit of wheel bearing grease. Grab a little bit on your finger, and then we're just going to rub this on the outside here. Keep it off the threads, but on the portion of the pin, they call this a pin, that pushes into the bushing on the lever, just like so. And then we're just going to slide it back in to here, like so. We're going to take our washer, slide it on the end of the pin after we've already pushed it through the lever, like so. Then our blue Loctite, or thread locker. And then we're going to thread this into here. You need your 5mm Allen for this. But you want to make sure that this turns freely. So if you get it to the point where it's not doing this and you've tightened it, and like it sticks and sticks or doesn't turn freely, then it's too tight. FYI. Okay, so now we are ready to install our shift rod. So we're going to remove this shift rod here and put on the one that came with our CNC racing setup. So to do that, you'll need an 8mm to go on here and then a 10mm to release this nut. So we put that here like so, and 10mm up here. Break it loose, spin this up a little bit, and then this whole thing just spins right off. Like so. Now, depending on which quick shifter model you have, this is the one that came stock with the bike, but if you happen to have an aftermarket one, in the CNC Racing kit, they provide this. This is for this extension here. On some quick shifters, this can be removed because sometimes they're super short, and this one would provide some additional length for you. But ours is fixed into here, so we don't need to remove that. So just wanted to make you aware of that. But we just take our rod and screw it onto the end. The connection points here to hold this in place are 10mm, and the nut is 10mm, so hence this is why you need two 10mm. Put one there, and then we'll just snug that for the time being, like so. All right, so now there are two mounting points here. I'm probably going to start with the one in front and not the one in back. So we go into our bag of goodies again, and there are two washers, one black, one silver. So our two washers, one black, one silver. Grab one of those. And then I think, let me make sure, because if it gets too long, yeah, not that one, this one. There are a couple of screws in here that are left. Probably can't see all of these, but of the four, you want the shortest one, which happens to be this one. And then there are two nylon lock nuts. Either one will do. So we'll want to feed washer onto the bolt first. Start to feed the bolt through the lever. Then the second washer goes on. And then we have our eyelet for our rod, and we'll feed that through. Followed by our lock nut. And let me get this out of the way so I have some room. The front of this, I believe, is 4mm. Yes, I am correct. And the back half is 10mm. So we'll hold that in place like so. Now we just need to attach our shift linkage back up here. So our shift linkage goes on such, and we'll have another screw that goes through here. This is where these two additional spacers come in. So if you see in the exploded view right there, it says to install, or it doesn't say, it shows to install both of these spacers. So that's what we're going to do. And I think they want to do that because they want this rod to be as vertical as possible so it doesn't bind. So for example, if you don't have those spacers, this may be too far in and it may bind when you go to shift as opposed to being out. And you probably can't really see that because of the camera angle. But I'm going to install both of them. They come with a couple of different bolts. So select the one that is appropriate. Again, I'm going to use a little bit of thread locker. So I'm going to put some thread locker on here, so this doesn't back out. And then we're going to run the bolt through here. And then I don't think it makes any difference which order of washers, whether you do the thinner one and then the thicker one, or the thicker one. I don't think it makes any difference. So I'm just going to put them on here. And then we have our shift linkage. and it simply screws into the shift linkage. Now, when we put the shift linkage up on the transmission rod here, or module, or whatever you want to call this little connector for the transmission, we want to make sure that this angle, so the angle from the shift linkage down to the rod, is 90 degrees. So we don't want it like this, and we don't want it like that. We want this to be as close to 90 degrees as humanly possible. So something like that. Now, before I push this all the way in, I'm going to slide my screw in here, because if you don't, you have a clearance issue here. So do it first, sort of put it in there like that, and then push this on. Try not to push my bike off the damn stand. There we go. So now it's all the way on. All right, and then we can tighten this down with our 8mm. There we go. Okay, so we got our 90 degrees here. We got a good 90 degrees here. We're snug down here. Now we need to adjust our toe peg. Now, this one has a folding toe peg. I'm not particularly crazy about folding toe pegs, but if you like it, you can keep it. I will probably eventually remove the fixed one off my Gillish tooling. This is the one that was on here before. I will most likely take this one off and replace it, but for this video, we'll just keep this right here. That is a 4mm, I believe. So I'm just going to line up the marks here, snug this down. And it's also 4mm on the back side. So all right. All right, so now you'll just need to do some final adjustments to make sure that this toe peg is where it's supposed to be. So you'll need to get on the bike, put your foot on here and do some shifting, maybe take it for a quick spin, make sure that it shifts appropriately. So we got good movement here and it's returning the way it's supposed to. So I'm still a little bit loose up here, so I'm going to tighten that up. Like so. And that is it. So I promised you guys I would give you updates on this bike. So let's do that and then wrap up real quick. So an update on this bike, where things stand. So two main issues with this bike. Some of you may have noticed that our Akasato race calipers, along with the brake lines, are not on the bike. That is because my new Akasatos would not hold pressure. Don't know why, so I had to send them back to the manufacturer, Akasato, in Italy for inspection, repair, and/or replacement. I'm told that that repair is complete and I should have the Akasatos back within the next week or two. The other thing is getting this bike tuned. So why isn't it tuned? I'm going to turn a long story long here. I wanted to make it short, but my local tuner, Reparto Veloce, tuned MV Agustas with ECU Studio. So ECU Studio is a software and hardware package sold to general consumers like you and I. But it allowed you to make basic changes within the bike, as well as alter fuel and ignition tables. Well, that software, the company has gone out of business, and recently, within the last 6 to 8, 9-ish months, they shut down their servers, and I'm told that renders the software completely useless. So if you have ECU Studios, please comment in the comment section below if that is in fact the case. I've never owned ECU Studios. I don't have a copy of it, so I don't know if that is in fact truthful or not. What does that have to do with getting this bike tuned? Well, this is the ECU that was originally in the bike. And this ECU, I'm at least the third owner of this bike, and this ECU has been flashed and locked with ECU Studios by a previous owner. Seeing ECU Studios is no more, and my local tuner, Reparto Veloce, can no longer tune this bike, I found EDR Performance up in Beaverton, Oregon, and Two Wheel Dyno Works, just another hour and a half, 2 hours north of them, in Washington State, that can in fact tune a stock ECU on the MV F3 and most MVs. However, there's a caveat. If you go to MV's website or any website that has OEM parts, whether it's Evolution Bike or Bike Dash Parts, I think they both list a bunch of stock parts, you'll find that this F3 lists about at least a half a dozen different ECUs for the bike, and not including the performance ones that come with the factory installed SC Project exhaust. That's a completely different animal all on its own. But it lists at least a half a dozen. There's probably more ECUs for this bike, and not all of them can be flashed and tuned by EDR Performance or Two Wheel Dyno Works up in Washington State. So in order to find out if your bike currently has an ECU that can be tuned by EDR or Two Wheel Dyno Works, you have to do one of two things. If you're local, you got to bring them the bike. However, I'm not local. I'm in Phoenix. I'm, I don't know, 16, 17 hours, 1,300 miles away. So a couple of days drive. So what I have to do is get one of these. This is the DimSport My Genius unit, and they send it to you. You use it, you ID the bike, you create a file, you send that file back to your tuner. They look at the file, check it against their database and say, yep, that one's in our database, we can flash it, or nope, sorry, that one's not in our database, you're SOL. In my case, because this is locked, what I did was I went online and I found a pre-owned one for this bike. And that is what's in the bike now. It starts the bike, it runs, it does everything. It's a virgin ECU, it's never been flashed, so it's not locked, so it's good. So I broke out my trusty My Genius unit from DimSport. I ID'd the bike, sent the file back to John, and John says, sorry, Derek, that's one of the ECUs we can't flash. John, being the awesome guy he is in EDR Performance, they could have just said, sorry, Derek, you're SOL, like I mentioned earlier, and you know, I'm done. However, he reached out to DimSport in Italy to see if they can get some information, maybe a file that will in fact allow them to flash and tune my bike. So where we stand with this bike, again, making the long story long, is that we are waiting for Italy to get back to John at EDR Performance to see if this is something they can help us with. The problem is that, well, now it's September, it's actually September 2nd, but Italy for pretty much all of the month of August shuts down completely, except for because tourist is really big. So if you're in the tourist and you know, restaurants and hotels and sightseeing things like that are open, but every place else is shut down for like the entire month. I don't know what the holiday or festival is. If you know, please comment in the comment section below, or I could just probably Google it myself. But they shut down for the entire month of August, essentially. So we've been waiting for a couple of weeks. They opened back up, my understanding is around the 25th or 26th of August. And I'm sure, you know, DimSport is a global company. They service tuners and individuals like myself all over the globe. And people are constantly reaching out to them. So I'm sure EDR Performance isn't the only one. And seeing they were closed for a month, they probably have an inbox of several thousands of emails. So we're waiting for them to get back to John at EDR Performance, hopefully with a file that allows them to tune the bike, at which point they'll send me the file. I'll put the file on my DimSport, I'll put that on the bike, and then if I can do that, then I can send the bike up to them so that can be dyno tuned on their dyno, so we can make sure that it's not running lean and it's running to its optimum performance. Anyway, again, that was a lot. That was a lot. So let's close this up. I'm Derek. This is your Superbike Life, ESBKLife for short. You guys know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, share, or smash the video if you didn't like it. Please don't do that. And anyway, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care, guys.